The recorder is recording. Cool. Episode 9, Season 15 of Mention and Dispatches. I got to do the math. We're up to episode 170-something since we started this whole thing with Mention and Dispatches. And again, for Season 15, we are leaning a little harder into talking with designers and design teams on this season. So to that end, we have with us our buddy Cyrano is back, who's not a designer. Well, you kind of design some stuff on the side every now and then, but like you're not here as the designer that we're here to talk to, right?
Absolutely not.
I hope not, because that would be a surprise to me. And but Jim is here because he knows WDS stuff fairly well, and we have an embarrassment of riches. I'm sorry, I've been
an embarrassment.
I've been waiting to use that for like a week. I apologize. We have both Rich Hamilton and Rich Walker. Rich Walker, welcome. We appreciate you being here.
Glad to be here.
And Rich Hamilton is back because we've had him on before to talk WDS stuff before, but you know we brought him back to talk more WDS stuff. So, Mr. Hamilton, sir, welcome back.
And thank you. Thanks for having me.
And we are going to have to go with last names because otherwise I'm going to get confused as to who we're talking to here. So the primary topic for discussion tonight, we are looking at the Sword and Siege games from Wargame Design Studio. There's the Age of Longbow stuff out there, but we are more focused on Crusades. So we've got Crusades Book 1 that is out there, and I'm presuming you wouldn't have called something Book 1 if there wasn't a Book 2 coming at some point down the line, right?
Yeah,
very soon.
That's the plan.
That is the plan. Okay, so thus far, a lot of what Wargame Design Studio has done were some extensions of existing Tiller lines of products, as well as some rework of some of those older game engines, some new titles built on some of those engines. Sword and Siege is something that we hadn't seen before from the Tiller Studios. Mr. Hamilton, sir, how did we end up in the Sword and Siege business and by extension into the Crusades business?
Right. Well, Rich Walker really gets the credit for that. Somehow he twisted John Tiller's arm into considering it as a viable project. So that happened. John passed away in April of 21. So Walker, what was that? Probably 2019 you started talking to him about this?
It would have been late 2019, and oddly enough, it didn't take very much strong arming there. I think John was pretty open to the idea.
Okay, so had its genesis when Dr. Tiller was still alive, and then it came with the IP purchase when David Freer and I purchased the John Tiller software line, and then so we just took it from there. It was really basically just at the concept stage. None of the mechanics to make it what it is today were really in place. For a period of time, Mr. Paul Bruffel was working with Rich. He was contracting with WDS. Paul did the Ancient Warfare series that's published through HPS Simulations. Unfortunately, Paul also succumbed to cancer. It's about 2 years ago now. So Paul was working with Walker for, I don't know, I guess it was probably about 10 months. Then it languished for a while. And then my lead programmer, Andy, stepped in to pick it up and carry it forward. So kind of a ups and downs process there. It took a while to get from concept to a playable game, but we got it there.
Huzzah! And we are there. Shifting riches here. So, Mr. Walker then had a bit of a sales job you had to do, and
just a little bit.
One of the things that has come up in conversation over the years around digital game design is the whole idea of like you should build a playable paper prototype first and then go start writing code at some point. Was there a paper prototype version of the Sword and Siege games, if not Crusade specifically, but something within that engine where you were just sort of playing around, poking around, trying to get the whole game engine working and balanced and get the system sorted out for you?
Well, John's idea, Dr. Tiller, was to adapt the Crusades using the system known as musket and pike. Yeah. And then adapt it later on as we needed to for special rules that would be incorporated into the Crusades era. So we took the existing code, or John did, from the M&P series, and then that evolved into now the Sword and Siege.
Okay.
So we don't necessarily, I mean, and I am taking it very literally here, but we don't sit down like a board game designer and lay it all out like that. We take the bones of an existing, we rip out the Napoleonic flags or whatever, what makes it the other game previously, and then we start pulling pieces in that will make it specific to that title, and then we define what changes need to be made. So it's the same it's a same concept, but it's obviously we're all digital. Everything we do is digital, so none of us are close. I mean, Rich is in Tennessee, I'm in Southern Virginia, David's in Australia, Andy's in the UK. So, everything that we do is digital. We don't sit around a table and hash it out for a month before we get going. So,
yeah.
I would add just one quick thing and kind of piggyback off of Rich Hamilton here. And when you use those systems that are already in place, it makes it much easier for existing players to go from one series to another series. So you'll find as you play WDS games that there's, for most of them anyway, there's a lot of similarities in the way they play. Now, they all have their own, uniqueness to them, but there's also some similarities that makes it easy for a player, say, going from, the American Civil War series, which is where I primarily did my design work until I moved over to the Sword and Siege series. And then moving over into a different series like Musket and Pike, where the Renaissance era games come from, and then now on to Sword and Siege. So using those systems that we already had in place makes it easy for customers to move from one to the other.
Yeah. Jim, they are talking about ripping out Napoleonic flags. I can't imagine you would.
I had to use that. I know what Jim's part is.
The wounds are deep and are real enough. No, actually, and I don't know, Mr. Hamilton, if you and I have ever discussed this, but my degree is actually in medieval. My master's degree is from Marquette University, and I was doing late medieval, early modern at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So my heart runs in this direction. And I guess, and I don't know which one of you would be the best able to answer this, but one of the things that strikes me, and I thought this, and I think I asked you the exact same question when we did the 30 Years' War, what was the biggest engine change you had to make the Middle Ages make sense?
Well, the biggest feature change for Crusades was the siege element. Actual destructible fortifications and gates and towers and all of that. So that's probably got to be it, because the rest of it, there was quite a few other changes involved. Horse archers being able to move, fire, and move again. To replicate the Muslim horse archers and whatnot. So there were other things, but the destructible features are probably the biggest one.
I agree.
I wonder in that context, well, first of all, my first thought was having playtested the Peninsular Wargame, I'm thinking I would have liked those. But that I'll ask that question downstream. When you come at a topic as big and wide as the Crusades, well, let me ask this question first. I don't want to duck it. I don't want to avoid it. The Crusades isn't the easiest game politically for some people. It's one of those periods of history that still has a resonance that even my beloved Napoleonic period really doesn't have. As much as I like to pretend that it might, and as much as I personally want to have that, the descendants of Bernadotte and drive them from the Swedish throne, I can't find many takers. You still get a lot of people talking about what happened in the Crusades, who started it, for want of a more elegant phrase, things like that. Did you have any of those conversations going into this project?
We did. I had a little misgivings doing it. I thought it might, turn into a dumpster fire, honestly, with a whole bunch of people showing up on our forums and whatnot and our Facebook page and just terrorizing. But that hasn't happened, thankfully. I don't know. I think we've done a good job, just like we do with everything we do, is to try to walk a middle ground of presenting what we understand to be the historical facts. We're not, fanboys of any one particular side or carrying a certain flag and beating others down. Just the facts, ma'am, as the saying went. We're attempting to be as historically accurate and respectful of all sides. And, people have extremely strong opinions about many things, and they can go that route. And we just try to stay out of that as much as possible.
In designing it, I would say that, I tried very hard to take an even hand with regards to both the crusading side and the Muslim side. There's scenarios where one can be the take the offense, the attacker, and then conversely here there'll be Muslim scenarios where they're the attackers. There's atrocities that could go around on both sides, and some of that is actually addressed in the game. But we try very hard to be even-handed about it there, and realizing that, it is sensitive. It can be a very volatile subject. And so, as Rich said, we tried very hard to be even-handed about it and not take sides.
Well, and you have that in World War II and any number of other topics. Vietnam, it was kind of dicey that John even published Squad Battles Vietnam when he did. What was that, 2001? Mm-hmm. It's not as touchy of a subject now, 20 some years later. But, as long as you're approaching it, I think the subject matter in a respectful manner and trying to be historically accurate, and you're trying to paint as a realistic picture as possible without just being a jerk about anything. I think people are respectable without that.
You said something that really I really should when I say you, I need to be more clear. Mr. Walker, you said something that really intrigues me. You said you deal with the atrocities somewhere in the game. I must know how.
Well, take for example Murad al-Numan or the Siege of Jerusalem. There's stories of cannibalism on the part of the Crusaders taking mm-hmm. part in being cannibalistic. Mm-hmm. There's stories of that kind, and so we address that in the scenario descriptions. Of course, we're not depicting that in the game itself,
Very good.
I was getting ready to ask how.
Yeah, no. But we do try to, like Rich Hamilton was saying a little while ago. We try to make sure that we maintain the historicity of it here, so that everything is described in the historical way it was, took place. So, and the Siege of Jerusalem, we're actually adding a few features that could be a little bit more dicey, just to, as you mentioned before, this is book one that we're mainly talking about here, but there is a book two that's under development right now. And we've got some civilians in there. I don't think we have any civilians in the first Crusade battle in the book one, but we do have some in book two. So there's some opportunity there to do that against civilians, but it's tastefully done, in as much as you can do that kind of thing. But it's part of the narrative of the subject matter that we're trying to depict, so we don't want to sugarcoat it. I taught history in the public school systems here, and in teaching, you don't want to sugarcoat things. You want to lay it out the way it is, or was in this case, and that's what we're trying to do with all the games that we do. And obviously now we're talking about Crusades, so we're trying to do the same thing with Crusades as we did in book one, and under development now is book two.
A lot of these battles, and I've done a fair amount of work on the Crusades. It was never my specialty, but I had a major professor for whom it was, and so I got to have all that positive RA experience, if you know what I'm talking about. A lot of the sources, something as simple as counting or enumerating troops on a battlefield was something that wasn't as important to medievals as it is to us today. Not that they were careless or lazy or any of that. They just thought about it differently.
Right.
So when you go to the sources and you try to build out an order of battle for a Manzikert or any number of these battles that I see enumerated in the package, how do you decide what that OOB looks like? Is it just gather the biggest pile of references you can and make your best considered estimate, or what do you do?
I mean, that's part of it. I mean, there's multiple sources for different battles. I mean, sometimes they're more detailed than others. Sometimes they're just a few lines here and there, but and sometimes they don't give any numbers at all, so a lot of times, you're making an educated guess as to what the numbers were. I mean, you can't take numbers literally in many cases in that era, time, and before. I mean, take Battle of Gaugamela, for example. It was estimated the Persians had 1.1 or 1.2 million against 50,000 Greeks. So you're not going to you're not going to get accurate numbers in many cases. So sometimes secondary sources are good for people having done that detailed research, and they can give you their estimated opinions on what the numbers actually were. And what I just try to do here is I take an aggregate of what I think is what makes sense, I mean, and also too, you got to take into consideration playability too. I mean, there has to be a reasonable way for both sides to claim victory. That's always the sign of a good scenario, is when both sides can win. So we try our best to make sure everything is as historically accurate as possible. But when you're dealing, as you mentioned yourself just a few moments ago, sometimes you just have to take educated guesses.
All right, I'm going to jump on a hobby horse in just a second, but I'll start and say, same answer for maps?
For maps, you said?
Yeah.
It depends on where. I mean, some battles, obviously, I mean, there's a great number of battles that I can tell you exactly. You take the battle of the Siege of Acre or the Siege of Jerusalem, Ascalon, there's all kinds of places that you can pinpoint the exact locations, Mm-hmm. In other cases like Mount Cadmus, you're taking an educated guess on where it could be. It was in the mountains in southern Turkey somewhere, so you try to take the route, that the Crusaders were taking there and where they were going, and you try to take a logical line from point A to point B, and you take the sources and they kind of give you a description of where it was up in the mountains there on a single path, and you try to look to see, I'll take Google Earth, for example, here, and I'll kind of scout around here, and I'll try to see, where it would be a good place for a battle of this nature, if there's not an exact location. But thankfully, as I mentioned a moment ago, and especially since we're dealing with the siege warfare, I mean, a lot of the places that we're depicting in the game here are actual places that you can visit today. And so it's not a problem with those. But there are battles where there are not exact locations, and you have to take educated guesses, kind of like you did with the numbers.
And I should let Brant get in here, but I can't not get on my hobby horse, look over at Rich Hamilton and say, why are we doing 3D graphics?
Because people want 3D graphics.
Who are these people? Have you spoken to them, or are you imagining them?
I have spoken to them extensively, and they howl when we don't have 3D graphics.
It just amazes me, because I will say, and I want to be clear when I say this, I adore what you have done with the graphics of the game. That I've been with this company and these games for a very, very long time, and I, like a whole lot of other people, wept when the beautiful original 3D painted graphics went away out of the Battleground games and they became 2D. But as you've improved them so significantly and made them every bit the equal of a chit and counter game on the tabletop, and then all of a sudden there are these resources which I must think are substantial, given the amount of work you're putting into this, that people like me that will never play 3D, or, well, never is too long, but are unlikely to play 3D, just can't help but feel that time could be better spent. But clearly you're talking to someone I haven't met, so there's a lot of them, huh?
Oh, hold on, you want some real fun? Ask Jim what all of his Saturday night fights are modeled in.
Yes, I'm well aware. His tabletop simulator. I'm like, Jim, why are you playing that, man? You got a perfectly good Napoleonic game on your computer. I know you do, a much larger scale, much larger battlefields. Yes, I've seen.
And they're all 3D.
Yep. Every
Yeah, but
one of them.
Gary comes by and hangs out, so I don't know what you're talking about.
So yeah, I mean, I'm a 2D player as well. There's just so much more information I can get at a glance. At 2D, I can see my command structures with a few highlighting features and whatnot. I see so much more of the map. It is my desired or my preferred method of play. But there are a lot of people that do like 3D, and literally we have people that post on our Facebook or forums or whatnot. Like, I'm not going to buy it if it doesn't have 3D. And so, we don't want to, we're small as it is. We're a niche company, niche hobby, totally. So the last thing we want to do is cut out a whole segment of potential customers just for want of a couple different views that which are obtainable. When we have the vast majority of the gaming public that would never play one of our games because they're just too complex. They don't want to spend the kind of time that's there. So, we don't want to make our group smaller for something that we could do.
I'd like to
he's
take
poking at you, Jim.
Asked and answered.
Yeah.
I was just going to mention, while we're talking about 3D here, I just want to mention real quick here Frank Mullins, who did most, if not all, of the 3D images. And if you read some of the posts that players have commented on, and they'll mention such things like, hey, how wonderful it is to have the shields accurately represented on the units or on the images that we're depicting in 3D. And he was a contributing factor to the whole genesis of this project there, because he wanted to make the knights and the men-at-arms and so on. So, he did a great job doing those 3D images that we see today.
Yeah, I agree. But Jim, you're not alone either. I don't know if you're familiar with Zilla Blitz, the YouTube channel.
Yes.
He's been doing a few videos on our games, and he's a 2D player too. Of course, he comes from a background, a board game background. But I even made a comment to him, and is like, there's 3D, right? He said, yeah, but the 2D just works for me better. So you're, definitely not alone.
Yeah, Zilla's a good dude.
Yep.
Jim genuflected in that direction, but I did want to take a little deeper dive on some of the research that you guys had done for this in two different directions. One, I am curious sort of who were some of the primary or key sources that you used versus others that you just sort of went to when you had to, but were there sort of as backup. But more to the point, as you were building the scenarios and putting together what was in the game itself, there were probably a handful of battles you knew ahead of time. Hey, I got to make sure I get this in there, right? The Siege of Acre. You've got to have certain things in there. But were there others that during the research you found some other battle that might not have been planned ahead of time and went, hey, that one's kind of cool. We should dig up more on that and let's get that one included. And if so, what were those?
Well, as Jim, since he has a master's degree in medieval history, he probably had a better background on some of those battles than I do. But as you are I kind of take it chronologically. I looked at, I knew I was pretty familiar with the First Crusade, which is the only true successful crusade. I mean, there were some other successes that you could point out here and there, but for the most part, the First Crusade was the only really successful crusade. So I pretty much knew all the battles that had to go with that. But there's a lot of battles that you come across just by reading the sources. Obviously, there's the primary sources, William Tyre, for example. But then there's also a lot of secondary sources that I use. Probably, and I'm sure Jim's familiar with Stephen Runciman, who wrote his 3-volume history on the Crusades. Basically, is kind of going in the direction that I started with. Volume 1 kind of deals with Book 1, and then his second volume is largely going to deal with Book 2, and so on. But there's a lot of material out there if you just go looking. Just as you start with page 1 and you go to the end there, you find all these other battles that were part of the Crusades. I mean, Book 1 is basically going from the beginning of the First Crusade to the end of the Second Crusade. Doesn't sound like a long time when you say it like that, but it's really about a little over 50-year process there. So First and Second Crusade, and then book 2 is going to be primarily the Third Crusade, which we all know from people familiar with Richard the Lionheart and so on, and then the Fourth Crusade, which I hesitate to say it's a crusade because it doesn't actually ever make it to the Holy Land. But anyway, that's another story. But
I was gonna say,
but when you get the Albigensian
was there, they had the intention of going. They just never quite made it.
Well, I'm curious to know after your research whether you conclude one of the great questions of Renaissance and medieval historiography is: did Henrico Dandolo intend to ever let them go?
Old man Dandolo.
Or did he just want to have them sack a city on the Adriatic?
I don't think that his original plan was to sack Constantinople there, but it just sort of ended up that way. I think he was more about the money than he was the actual territory. But anyway, that's just one of those things that kind of goes. It's an interesting, where you go from. Byzantine, which they themselves call themselves Romans. They never called themselves Byzantines, by the way, but they just called themselves Romans. But then you had the Latin era, which started after the fall of Constantinople for a while. It didn't last very long, by the way. But that's an interesting story here, and we couldn't very well have a history of the Crusades and not include that, but we're kind of getting a little ahead of ourselves, I guess, here, because that's kind of what we're talking about for book 2. But book 1, pretty much ends with the Second Crusade there, which it never ceases to amaze me as you looked at the battles and the participants in the battles and how often they kept on making the same mistakes over and over and over again. You would have thought they would have learned after a couple of times, but they kept doing the same thing over and over again. It just never ceased to amaze me how many mistakes were made. And, how they probably could have been a lot more successful if they just cleaned up their tactics and their overall plan instead of just kind of, hoping for the best. And there you go. I mean, it just doesn't work out that way. I think the Muslims got their revenge on the Second Crusade, from having lost the First Crusade. I
just want everybody listening to notice that you got bonuses tonight. You got a show with Enrico Dandolo jokes, okay? Take that.
Oh, man, the Doge of Venice.
Yeah, how many of those you got? No,
undocumented bonuses.
Yeah, they're like Easter eggs, just better.
Season 15 of Mentioned in Dispatches is graciously supported by all of our Patreon members, but especially our regimental patrons who supported us at the top level. The Armchair Dragoons would like to thank Miles R., James M., Kevin Bertram, Catastrophe Games, Fred and his dog, Joseph Knorr, Patrick Garrity, Michael Sunborg, Stagger Wing, and Paul LaFontaine. Wargaming is our jam, and they help us spread it. You too can support the Regiment of Strategy Gaming as a Patreon supporter at patreon.com/armchairdragoons.
I was thinking as you were talking, and what you say makes a great deal of sense as you make your way through it. I mean, obviously, there's a tremendous literature there. I don't know, to Brant's point, there's a number of Crusades that I'm not sure you want to do, but I don't see any battles in here, and correct me if I'm wrong, because it's been a minute since I had my nose in the book, but you don't have any of them from Portugal, do you?
No, see, there's a number of Crusades that are not. See, we're dealing with the Crusades, aside from the Fourth Crusade, which we already talked about, just more or less ended with Constantinople, but all the rest of them there are in the Levant, which is right. Israel, Lebanon, Syria, Egypt, and so forth, and Turkey. But we're not dealing with the Cathars of southern France. We're not dealing with the northern Baltic Crusades. We're not dealing with Portugal or any of those. So there's a lot of Crusades that were called Crusades by contemporaries. But I think that the vast majority of the public would only recognize the Crusades that is in present day the Middle East.
And
I feel attacked.
But no, we're not.
It's not like it's news that you're an outlier.
Yeah.
I mean, come on now.
I'm excited. I've been poking at this for a minute. I'm just waiting to get to all the battles. Sorry, that indeed was me going down into my little cul-de-sac and trying to figure out exactly how many battles. I do have other game-related questions, but let me get out of Brant's way first.
Well, I was going to say, Albigensian Crusade or we riot, but I think you're right. It's barely a crusade when it's, more we're going to start verging on political, and I'd rather not. But yeah, the Guillory family name traces itself back to the Languedoc region of southern France. So I was sort of interested in the sourcing of it all, but knowing, you guys know your audiences really well because you've been doing this for quite a while, and you've got kind of a built-in audience that's already there. You've got a potential audience that you're going to end up attracting as a part of putting something out on a particular subject matter. So you're going to have folks that are the built-in WDS fans that, hey, if WDS is making it, I'm buying it. But then you've got folks that are interested in the Crusades that aren't ever going to touch a Panzer Campaigns game, but are going to fall all over themselves for Sword and Siege games. Medieval warfare is their thing. And as a part of building this, obviously there is the historical reference point and the historical sourcing that we just discussed. But at some point, are you also understanding that the audience may want certain concessions to be made for playability, for the narrative, for, the comic book aspect of it, let's say, or the cinematic aspect of things? How much are we sort of putting our thumb on the scale in order to make a better narrative or some fan service towards the topic as people might expect it to be, even if the history book didn't actually line up? Did you tell those folks to kiss off? No, man, I got historical sources that say something different. Or did you say, all right, nobody's reading the history anyway, let's put the fun stuff in there? Rich, Mr. Walker. I wanted to say Rich, and I realized
All right. Well, real quick, there's in book 1, for example, there's 74 scenarios if you include the get started scenario. And there were not 74 battles between the First and Second Crusade. So my point is there's a lot of variance in those selections of battles that allow you some flexibility in design. So I can, for example, put out there the siege of Jerusalem, that fell in 1099. And instead of just having a straight siege where you have the defenders within the walls and the crusaders outside the walls, I can throw in there what with the intended Fatimid relief force that got stalled in Ascalon. And then we had the Battle of Ascalon here a few months later. Or a few weeks later. But what if that relief force had actually made it on time before the fall of Jerusalem? So, yeah, there's a lot of what-if situations that the scenarios try to address to give players the opportunity of doing those things that aren't necessarily in the history books.
Yeah. So,
and we as far as, I wouldn't say compromising, but game mechanic wise, obviously a siege is a prolonged process, right? But it's accelerated, right? So, the timing, it doesn't take as long to bust a hole in the wall, create a breach so you can send troops in. The siege mechanic to where if you isolate a fortress, fatigue starts accumulating on the defenders. Well, that takes a whole lot less time than it does in reality. So, compromise is probably not the right word, but that was a fudge, if you will, for playability's sake, to get something that's enjoyable and playable rather than 600 turns of, digging a trench and lobbing stones at the wall to eventually break through on the 580th turn. So you have 20 turns of hand-to-hand combat, right? So there's those type of compromises, but not so much in just total fanciful unit inclusions or something of that sort.
As I try to explain to some people here, a siege is only decided on the last day. So in a lot of the scenarios, I put in a description here that we're depicting the last day of the siege in a time compression manner. Now, some of the sieges depicted are at different times during the siege. Like, I'm sure Jim knows, like the siege of Antioch there was 9 months worth, right?
Yep.
I don't even know how many turns that would be at 10 minutes a turn. Our game is 40 meters with 10 minutes, and even if you did an hour for each nighttime turn, I have no clue how many turns that would be. I'm afraid to look. But there's, I think, 4 scenarios that deal with the siege of Antioch in different ways and at different times during the siege. So we do that. But also, like I said, in my scenario descriptions and in the scenario notes, designer notes, and so on, I try to let the audience know, let the players know that this should be considered a time compression period. That, as Rich had said a few moments ago here, I mean, we're condensing the time it takes for starvation to set in by implementing isolation rules so that fatigue is gained at a higher rate than would be in a real-time situation.
Said, looking at your campaign Vicksburg game. just saying. I'm just saying. But if it indeed is, as it is, 9 months with 6 turns an hour, that is 38,880 turns. But I digress.
and no,
that's a whole lot of hitting the next turn button.
I think one of our designers, isn't that right, Rich Hamilton here, that there is a game, one of our games has over 1,000 turns, something close to that.
Yeah, John Ferry created a 1,300 turn scenario for Campaign Overland. With special house rules to control reinforcements and supply and all that good stuff. So,
well, Feet Wet in Normandy is what, 600? So
yeah.
It's not like there are these things that take us to, I won't say absurdity because I like it. So, but I think saner people might have a different opinion.
I'm just looking at the guys playing Third Winter or Case Blue or DAC and going, only 112 turns, you pansies.
You are insufficient.
Well, I did actually make a scenario which is the Siege of Damascus, which is more or less the last battle of the Second Crusade, or what would be the last battle of the Book 1 Crusades title. Mm-hmm. And I put all 4 days of the siege in that one scenario. I think it comes to 380 turns, give or take. So there's that. But that's the longest one in the game. Most of them are between 30 and 40 turns, with some less.
That is so. I guess I will then ride very briefly my hobby horses, just because people ask. I love the user interface in WDS games like I did in the Tiller games. I am used to them. I admit it.
Yeah.
They're like a comfortable brown shoe, and I just go to work. And you're absolutely right. It is a real assistance to entry. If you've mastered one, there'll be some buttons in different places, and maybe they do different things, but you'll have 80% familiarity walking in the door, which I think is pretty great.
Right.
That having been said, I know you guys are probably sick and tired of answering it, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What is the long-term look at the UI for you all? What is that going to look at like down the road?
Not going to get real specific with you, but we are actively working on UI redesign, moving it to a more sleeker, more modern approach. But that's hopefully within reach of all of us old salts that have been using it for decades. Hotkeys will be your friend, big time. It should just look a lot more like a more modern game than where, what we are for. Really, people call it a Windows 95 game. Well, yeah, I mean, it's buttons and menus. That's where we are today. It will probably be more some buttons, but a whole lot more keyboard shortcuts, and then context sensitive with your mouse, and right clicking, pop up menus on the screen and whatnot.
What?
Yeah. So we'll see where it goes. We are actively developing it now. It's a little bit early to I don't have any screenshots to share with you. Yeah. So it's coming. Yeah. I'm just going to leave it there.
Wow.
Okay. I've been playing the Tiller games since 1997 when I picked up I think Ardennes was the first game I got, and then I got Battleground Gettysburg right after that. So since 97, so pushing 30 years. So I mean, I'm just like you. I'm good. I really don't need anything to change. If anything, I could get rid of some of the buttons because between my mouse and my keyboard shortcuts, I'm good. I can do what I need to do. But we want to be accessible to a younger generation too. Drag some more people into historical wargaming, and and there's a lot of people that will just look at our interface and won't even try it. So,
Well, I'm sure you can guess which one was my first. And so, yeah, wow, I just realized it'll be 30 years next year. Holy cow.
There is actual, statistical evidence that the interface does matter, and that, particularly in educational contexts, that folks are really only learning one thing at a time. So if they're busy learning the interface, they're not learning the lesson you want them to learn from whatever digital presentation you're putting in front of them. Now, I realize that is a different animal when you're talking about an entertainment context like what we are looking at. But let's face it, a lot of folks are playing some historical games for some of the learning and the experiential value that they get out of them as well. The interface absolutely matters. If you're spending your time trying to remember which buttons to push, you're not focused on what you could be learning or absorbing from the material in front of you, in this case, the game.
Right.
So it does matter, and those on-ramps, I think, are important. So, to Jim's point, man, if that's what you're not even thinking about it. It's amazing some of the Civ series games, the limited computer gaming that I do. I've been doing Civ stuff for so long. I mean, it's subconscious thought at this point, right? It's muscle memory, which buttons you're pushing. It's like watching my son with one of his FIFA games or in one of his Destiny 2 speed runs. It's muscle memory, right? It's like sitting down playing guitar for him. And because the interface is so ingrained, and it can, you guys have acknowledged it can be a bit of a hurdle for folks.
So, but we'll have when it is fully implemented, and that's a whole nother discussion because we currently have 116 titles through 12 different series, and more is under development. So brand new series, topics that we've never published anything on. So, more is coming. But when the dust settles and, what we're dubbing internally as 2.0 is fully rolled out, it's going to be the same concept so that players, once they learn it and get comfortable, they can move from a Napoleonic game to a musket and pike or a sword and siege, and not have a learning curve with each different one. We're all war gamers too. We all want to play the game. We don't want to fight with the UI or the rules or whatever. We want to enjoy what we're there to do.
All right, question number 2, and this one applies specifically to the Crusades, but applies more broadly as well. You knew this question was coming. How's the AI?
I think it's significantly better than where we were, say, 5 years ago. Some significant, not only attention to detail in the scripting and how scenarios are set up. A key factor in our development is we know better than 70% of our customer base plays only against the AI. So that's a key point in our testing and our design. But we've also got a programmer that's about all he's doing is continuously making improvements on the AI. Am I going to sit here and tell you that it's a fantastic opponent and you'll never need to play against a human? Absolutely not. But
he's throwing you a bone, Jim.
It'll put up a pretty solid defense. It'll make a counterattack. I mean,
So it's more than just shadow boxing with you.
Yeah, it's come a long ways. Now, to a dyed-in-the-wool play-by-emailer or somebody that plays head-to-head all the time, it's probably still not going to be enough to engage them. I mean, it's hard for me. I mean, I've played hundreds of play-by-email games over the years. I mean, normally I'm playing against a human, so, but we have many people reporting new to the games or have come back and tried it because they got sick of the AI, but they've tried it since we've been working on it, and they're pleasantly surprised.
If you're playing by email, are you sure there's a human on the other end?
Absolutely.
Playing my chat bot.
Right.
All right. Well, related thereon too, and again, it applies here. And I would tell anybody, no matter which one of these games, certainly Crusades, these gentlemen at WDS have, and ladies, I suppose, have the most robust multiplayer capacity of any game of this type. I have said for years, it blows my mind that Dr. Tiller and his crew unlocked the magic sauce to create multiplayer for this sort of a game, and nobody else has learned it.
Yeah, it's really. I still, I attended and ran basically, and then Rich Walker helped with one of them as well, TillerCons, and basically it was a big LAN party, and we had multiplayer games going for 2 and 3 day weekends, and that's really where the games shine the most. Probably, I think I played a Gettysburg game, 3-on-3. The second day of Gettysburg, and all 3 players are making their moves at the same time. The game moves along very quickly. It's very engaging. You can only control the troops that are assigned to you while your cohorts are doing their forces and whatnot. So yeah, it's really strong. Now, the internet has changed over the years. So what used to be an easy networking is not so easy anymore. Really, you need to use Hamachi or something, a VPN service, to create that virtual private network to get a good connection. We are going to be revisiting our networking setup as well. If all goes well, that those features that we both like about the multiplayer feature, we're going to try to roll a lot of that into the play-by-email module, so that you could have multiplayer games and play-by-email, only be controlling certain portions of your forces. If all goes well, we'll have couriers and things of that sort. Anyways, we have a tremendous amount of plans ahead.
On that point, and you've probably, if you've seen us play at all online, we have a gentleman, Mike OJ. He if you do that for PBEM, he will die. He will stroke and die. I'm not even kidding. That is something we've obviously wanted for a long time. We're very eager to see, and that was actually going to be my next question. So I get to skip to, the next one on my list is, and I'm sorry it doesn't have anything to do with this, but when do I get another World War I game?
You'd have to talk to Ed Williams.
I'm going off the reservation, man.
I'm going to find Ed. Okay, very good. Find Ed.
I keep bugging Ed, and it's like, so when are we getting it, man? I don't know. I don't know.
And you have plans to expand Southern Front?
I'm not going to speak to his content at all. I mean, that's his baby, and we've told him we'll publish whatever you produce. So
sorry, I skipped ahead because I don't want to be rude to the topic at hand. I meant strategic war.
Oh, strategic. I kind of thought that you were talking. I thought you might be talking about, Gallipoli type.
Oh yeah, well, I'll talk about that all day long too if you want. But I want to be as polite as I can.
Yeah, we have all sorts of plans for the Strategic War series. Another game is well into development. No, I'm not going to share any publication dates, but there's a high probability you'll see a new title in 26, and then updates to the existing games, and then spinning that off, going back further in history and utilizing that engine and other genres is a very high probability as well.
And my final off-topic question, you posted, I saw you do it, and I didn't say anything because I knew I was going to get to talk to you. You posted all the lovely updates for squad battles, and there was nothing for Vietnam or World War I.
Yeah, well, okay, so gonna throw David under the bus on that one. That's his series, not my wheelhouse, so I can't really comment on that. I'm the pre-20th century guy. It's the plan is Our stated WDS plan is eventually the entire Squad Battle series will get updates, because currently, 2/3 or maybe even at least 2/3 of the series is still at the state, when we took it over. They're at 4.0, so had slight updates from the JTS days, but very slight. So, the plan is, none of them are getting abandoned. They'll get another update to bring the engine up to speed, and a graphical update of some sort. Whether they'll be as extensive as what has gone into the World War II titles, no, I'm not going to commit to that. Don't know yet. But anyways, that's about as detailed as I can get on that.
Let's go! And then returning finally, for me at least, to the topic at hand, how far do you go with the medieval period? What else do you do? You've done the 100 Years' War, you're working the Crusades. What else is out there for you?
Tons.
Yeah. So Rich Walker has already alluded to it a couple times, and we specifically held off on doing a preview on our site. So this is the quote-unquote official announcement that, Book 2 is in the short window for publication. It'll be, say, in early 26, which...
So not quite in time to find it under your tree.
Not going to make it for Christmas. But we don't release anything after the middle of November anyways, because our Christmas or our winter sale starts up in the middle of December, and we don't want a new game showing up 2 weeks before the sale starts, and then it gets just obscured, with the pandemonium of the regular sale. So,
absolutely.
So it's on the polishing stages. Still have work for that, but we are planning on publishing a preview post on that November 28th. So this podcast will go live before that, and then roughly 2 weeks after that, a preview will go, and then we've got multiple other titles. The thing about what we do and who we are is, we don't stick to just topics that are blockbusters, the Waterloos and the Gettysburgs and so on and so forth. We try to allow the designers to get into obscure topics, and as long as we can sell a reasonable number of copies, it's being digital. You have that ability. We don't have to do a P500 because we're not going to do a pay for a print run and have to have it all in a warehouse waiting, right? So anyways, we've got a lot of stuff coming in the medieval area and further back in history as well.
That's exciting.
Jim, what's your Napoleonic battle that you always benchmark obscurity against?
Wow. I've got a number of them.
Well, no, I'm thinking it was Napoleonic. It could be a 30 Years' War battle, but there's one that you guys always break out that you're like, oh yeah, does it have the Battle of blah in there? And I just... Look, man, I'm hopped up on cold meds right now. I am not thinking straight. I have to keep muting my mic in the background so I'm not coughing all over the podcast.
Oh,
Jim is here to take over the Q&A.
I know what it is. It's Bautzen.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, that's one of the benchmarks. Is there a Bautzen scenario in there somewhere? And there is.
Well, let's be fair to our dear friends at WDS. They have a whole campaign Bautzen, which is why they're as good as they are, and why I love them.
You try to address the entire picture, right? Not just the big points. If I may, we would like to throw out that we have a free demo for the Sword and Siege series, which is based on Crusades Book 1. Mr. Walker put it together. So it gives you it's a small sampling. It's a fully playable demo, standalone. You got, I think it's like 5 scenarios in it, a couple open field battles and a couple siege scenarios. So to give you a trial of what the game is like, you don't got to spend a penny. You do need to step through the store, which then sends you a download link and a serial number. So you do got to actually go through the order process to get it. But then you can try it before you buy it. See if you like it. And then
And we got the demo linked on the actual podcast page on our site. So like if you're subscribed through iTunes or Spotify or whatever, like you're not gonna see it in iTunes, but if you go to our page to the actual episode page on our site, it's linked link there also, so you can get straight to the demo from there.
Okay.
So
and wargameds.com, and just scroll down a little ways, and there's a box to click for game demos, and we actually have 10 of them up there representing 10 of our 12 series that you can check out. So
this is where the curmudgeonly guy who has abused you for 45 minutes comes on and says two things. Number one, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to find out what it's like, go to the website just cited. The website just cited. Wargame DS, is that right?
Yes,
yeah,
Wargame DS.
WargameDS.com. Go look game demos there. Try them out. And number two, it never will cease amazing me that in the day and the age we live in, that you have continued to push all your support forward. I know I'm sitting here begging for World War I squad battles and Vietnam and all that other stuff. But the fact that those of us who have owned some of these Napoleonic games for such a terribly long time are still getting lovely updates to not just the graphics, which are very nice in 2D, but
in 2D.
Also the mechanics, the under the hull, or the under the under the hood. That's what I wanted. Under the hood type stuff. So great. Really.
Gotta give Henrik a call out. He's a programmer, lives in Germany, who's been working with me since back actually still under JTS banner. So I think he started on version 1.09 of the Napoleonic battles is when he took over maintenance of that. Wow. And he's a fan of the series, and it shows. I mean, we've got no joke, I want to say like 14 pages of enhancement. Most of it's enhancements and refinements, additions, bug fixes, of course. It's software. There's always going to be something. But, I mean, just pages and pages of changes that just really enhance gameplay. So, and this series, Sword and Siege, has benefited greatly from all that as well, because we've carried it into this series as well.
And I think it's important to note, as someone who is involved in some of it over the years, and I mean a fraction of a fraction, I've always admired the conversations. These changes, some of them are technical and, fix this bug, fix this crash, whatever. But when there are mechanical changes to the rule systems, they're always made very deliberately and very thoughtfully. I haven't agreed with all of them over the many years, but I have always respected where they come from, and I certainly expect the Crusades Book 1 to be no different.
Yeah, there's always a lot of debate about each and every one of those, by the way. So they're not slam dunks. You got to fight for what you believe in sometimes.
Make your case.
And sometimes you got to take it on the chin.
Yep. You don't get everything you want. Sometimes the rule change that you want doesn't make sense, and then sometimes it's just because programming takes time that time's not always available.
Yeah, for sure.
Dude, I'm an IT PM for my day job. I know, believe me. Jim asked sort of, where does this go from here? And you were saying, well, what do you want? In terms of some of the other topics, I mean, just off the top of my head, like there's a whole lot of stuff in Eastern and Northeastern Europe, right? The Teutonic Knights, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. I mean, there are plenty of places some of these could go. Now, some of them probably start to overlap with the Musket and Pike series at a certain point.
So the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, this week's game of the week is Great Northern War. 1700 to 1721, Sweden and Poland, that plays a very big part in that. Granted, a little bit further in history, but we definitely cover all sorts of nooks and crannies. So
yeah. So, but all of those are also European. At what point do we get further east and we start to get into like Persian medieval history, or even better, like medieval India, or those medieval Chinese era conflicts? Is it a sourcing issue? Is it we just need somebody who's interested enough to design something issue? Is it we're trying to be cognizant of the market to whom we are selling? Like what would be a limiting factor on getting outside of Europe for some of these medieval warfare scenarios?
The biggest limiting factor is a scenario designer with an interest / passion in the topic. All these gentlemen, they're doing things that they want to do. We're not saying, hey, I want you to make a game on X.
Yeah.
Okay, boss, I got to go do that. No, this is Rich Walker's passion. He's brought this topic to us, and we've supported him in getting it out the door. And likewise, Rich White, yet another Rich on the team, who was the scenario designer for Age of Longbow, 100 Years War. So now he's brought up the Mongols, wanting to do some work on that. I know there's a ton of history in China and Japan and Korea and blah, blah, blah. So don't have anybody that's expressing an interest in doing that. So at least as of the moment, nothing's moving in that category.
Yep.
I'm hopeful to see some samurais one of these days. It may be years ahead, maybe years down the road, but who knows?
Yeah.
Well, the person that wants to do that game usually puts out a new game about every 5 years. So I'm not sure when he's going to get to that.
Fair enough. So I wanted to ask because, again, what has happened so far has been primarily based in Europe and the Near East. And then the things on the roadmap are sort of extensions of those, which cool. Like that's where like you said, that's where the designers have wanted to take the topics. So I just wanted to ask, was there anything on the roadmap? Did we have somebody already expressing an interest in it? Sounds like not yet, but certainly available as an option should somebody bring it to you.
Yeah, I mean, if there's somebody with a passion that they need to have played our games.
Well,
They don't need to be an expert in it, but they can't be clueless either. But if they're really interested in the topic, we can help them along in the process. If they're really into their topic, we can make the details of the engine come together for it. I have somebody working in something in the Southern Hemisphere that's totally new for most wargaming. So, but that's what his interest is, and we can support that. So, anyways, yeah. So I guess we'll see if somebody's listening and does have an interest.
That'd be very cool. Folks, we're a little over an hour as we are recording this. Again, once it gets edited down, we'll come in a little closer to an hour. I'm running out of voice here. I am going to throw last question over to Jim and let him wrap this whole thing up on our way out of here. So, Jim, any final parting questions you want to lob at the riches?
I have a folder, but I will avoid it because I wish to be a good host to our wonderful guests, and I will just talk about this piece. And I realize this is probably something I should have hit you with earlier, and you mentioned it. But looking at the victory conditions of the scenario design in the Crusades, one of the things that has been said over the many years, particularly about the Napoleonic games, which are of course my interest, is that they're entirely too sanguinary. Is there any thought to one of two things: figuring out a new way to assess victory conditions, and two, trying to develop a system of morale collapse above that of the individual unit?
So, I mean, do you want me to answer that, Mr. Walker, or do you want to?
Well, I mean, as far as Crusades go, I mean, I have tried to innovate some victory conditions that are a little off the norm, but generally speaking here, I mean, we have to work within the system, and usually to determine victory, you are going to try to come out with fewer losses than your opponent, and then the capture occupation of various victory hexes. I mean, that's kind of what that's kind of how these games were designed to operate. But there are some effort made to be a little more innovative and a little more, off that typical, victory condition. But most of the scenarios are going to, thus far anyway, be within that same realm that we just talked about. Lose less people than your opponent, and if there's victory hexes, try to capture and hold them.
So we're looking at there's a variety of objective types in the Civil War Battle Series. Berto implemented those. We're going to bring most of those over into this series and related series. So we'll have a little bit more variety to choose from. Capture, hold it for a certain amount of time, so on and so forth. So we are looking at that. To your point of morale at greater than the unit level, yes, but I mean, that's one feature, like the early termination feature in the First World War campaigns games. We get complaints about that. Guys are like, I was, rolling, and all of a sudden it says, bam, the scenario's over. So yeah, when we get complaints about something, we generally don't like to repeat that. Just saying.
Yeah.
Wait, is that what you're supposed to do when people gripe? You're supposed to do something different?
Yeah.
See,
Yeah,
I told you, Brant. I told you.
Jim, make a note. I might have to try this for once and see what happens.
So we might, we have had calls, for Army level fatigue and whatnot. So maybe the whole Army collapses or something of that sort. If we were to implement something like that, it would be an option, or it would apply to some scenarios, but not all scenarios. We would never want to implement that just as a blanket feature. So
interesting.
Yep.
All right, Jim, you're going to have to save the rest of the folder for next time we've got him here.
All right.
So,
thank you for having us, guys.
No, so gentlemen, this has been great. I really appreciate it. Especially, looking forward at some of the Sword and Siege stuff that's coming, as well as discussing how we got to the point we're at with the first Crusades game. I knew there was a danger in bringing Jim here that we were going to get off of the Crusades and onto other stuff, but I was willing to roll the dice on it, and fortunately, he stayed mostly on topic. So thank you, Jim. I appreciate that.
I did try.
No, this is great. So again, as mentioned, there's a whole bunch of demos. The Crusades demo is linked to this episode, so you can go take a look on the episode page on our site and pull it down from there, or just go hit wargameds.com and take a look at the mountain of stuff they've got. If you are a regular Tuesday Newsday reader, you also know that the game of the week from WDS is usually one of the first. It's usually the first bullet, and rarely more than second or third down in our sales section each week in Tuesday Newsday. But that's because they have something different on sale literally every week. So it's a reliable bullet in that section of Tuesday Newsday that you can always find Wargame Design Studio's game of the week on sale there, unless they've got some other bigger sale going on, and so they've suspended the game of the week because everything is on sale. And those generally that's twice a year, right? Once in the summer, once in the holidays is when you guys do those, right?
That is correct. So
yeah,
about mid-December, the next one will start up.
Yeah, so about the time the season wraps up is when you'll start to see those. Look, it's as far as serious wargaming on the computer goes, these guys are one of the gold standards of that. It's not a bunch of run and gun first person shooter stuff. It's deeply researched historical topics, and you can toggle 2D or 3D to your preference. Jim, hold it. Just stop. Put Jim on mute. So you have your choice between 2D or 3D. Again, one of the other things that was mentioned is you are always getting engine updates for games you bought like 9 years ago. Whenever the engine update comes out, you get it, and that's not something very many people do. I know we are drifting into infomercial mode here for Wargame Design Studio, but there's a reason that we sing their praises as regularly as we do. And it's because they do good stuff and they take care of their customers. And that's really all you can ask of just about anybody these days. So Mr. Hamilton, Mr. Walker, we appreciate your time here. Thank you very much. Jim, always great to have you crash the podcast, especially on a night when my voice was not going to be up to a full hour and change. So thank you for bailing me out at least. And audience, we are winding down season 15. Still got a couple more to go, including yet another designer interview coming up a little later. We've also we're going to bring in some folks to talk about some of the fall conventions. So people that were at SDHisCon or BotosCon or Compass. Foxconn got canceled. I don't know if we've got somebody from Weekend at the Warehouse that's going to be joining us. I got to go back and look at the guest list. But we'll definitely have Botos and SDHist and Compass all represented. So would love to share that with you. And we've got something interesting and different we're going to try for our season finale this year and see what you guys think of that. Everybody, appreciate you being here, and we'll catch everyone next time on another episode of Mention in Dispatches.